The idea of dueling goes way back to the Middle Ages, with trial by combat. If you were accused of a crime, you might fight your accuser to prove your innocence. One of the most famous ones was the Duel of Carouge. In 1386 in France, Knight Jean de Carouge accused another knight, Jacques Legris, of attacking his wife. The two fought in front of the king and the entire court. Carouge killed Legris, clearing his wife's name. This was one of the last official trials by combat in France, and it was so dramatic it inspired books and even a whole movie. As Europe entered the Renaissance, honor had mattered more than ever, especially among nobles and poets. For example, take Ben Jonson's duel. In 1598, in London, Jonson, who wrote plays before Shakespeare, had become famous, but he killed a fellow actor named Gabriel Spencer in a duel with swords. He barely escaped execution and went on to become one of England's greatest writers. Imagine if he'd lost, we'd never have his place. In France, the Duel of the Minions occurred in 1578. It saw dozens of noblemen clash in a wild fight involving swords and daggers. It left several dead and injured, and became infamous as one of the bloodiest noble duels of the Renaissance. When Napoleon's officers weren't fighting other nations, they were fighting each other. The most legendary example is the Fournier versus Dupont rivalry. In 1794, two French cavalry officers began feuding and ended up fighting over 30 duels across 19 years, using swords, pistols, and even on horseback. Neither man ever gained the upper hand, and their bizarre feud became so famous that author Joseph Conrad later wrote The Duel, which Ridley Scott adapted into the film The Duelists. Heading over to Russia, dueling claimed the life of one of their greatest cultural icons, Alexander Pushkin. He was often called the Russian Shakespeare, but was constantly defending his honor. Rumors had spread about his wife's loyalty, and Pushkin challenged George d'Ont, a French officer, to a pistol duel. Pushkin was shot in the abdomen and died 2 days later. His death shook Russian society. The United States had its own share of infamous duels. The most famous one? Alexander Hamilton versus Aaron Burr, 1804. The sitting vice president killed one of the nation's founding fathers in New Jersey. Hamilton may have fired into the air, but Burr's shot struck true, ending Hamilton's life and Burr's career in disgrace. Andrew Jackson versus Charles Dickinson, 1806. Dickinson insulted Jackson's wife, and the two met with pistols. Dickinson fired first, hitting Jackson in the chest, but Jackson stayed standing, calmly took aim, and killed Dickinson. The bullet stayed lodged near Jackson's heart for the rest of his life, but he still went on to become president. By the late 1800s, most countries outlawed dueling, but that didn't stop a few dramatic last acts. In fact, in 1842, even Abraham Lincoln almost tuned into some duel action. He was challenged to a duel by a political rival. Lincoln cleverly chose the weapon, a broadsword, knowing his long arms gave him an advantage. His opponent backed down, and luckily Lincoln never had to swing. In 1908 France, politician Georges Clemenceau's ally Joseph Catlot fought a duel after a political feud, showing that even in the modern era, politics could still come down to pistols. The last recorded duel in France happened in 1967. Two politicians, Gaston Defferre and René Ribière, fought with episwords after an insult in Parliament. No one died, but it showed how long the tradition lasted. So from knights in armor to poets with pistols to American politicians at dawn, duels weren't just about fighting, they were about protecting pride, reputation, and status. But as laws changed, weapons got deadlier, and society modernized, the idea of killing someone over an insult was just pointless.